Hello, I am Anvesha, and welcome to the fifth and final episode of the video series where we focus on the Wolfram High School Summer Camp experience. In today's live stream, we are going to take an in-depth look into the Wolfram High School Summer Camp experience, both in person and virtual. From the virtual 2020 camp, we're joined by Quinn. Drake and McEwen attended the camp in 2019, the same year as me, and Macy has attended the Wolfram High School Summer Camp for 3 years, in person in 2018 and 19, and virtually in 2020. So let's get started with the introductions. I am Anvesha Das, and I'm a high school senior from Kanpur in India. I attended the Wolfram High School Summer Camp in person in 2019. Following that, I was a part of the Wolfram Emerging Leaders Program in 2019, and I'm currently a Wolfram student ambassador. So why don't we all go around and introduce ourselves? Maybe we can start with Quinn.
Hi, my name is Quinn Mcintyre. I'm a junior in high school at the Stanford Online High School. I attended, as Anvesha said, the camp virtually in 2020. And right now I'm actually continuing my work that I did on the camp with the Wolfram Physics Project as a junior research affiliate.
Hello, I'm McEwen.
Yeah, let's have McEwen.
Okay.
It's okay. I think all of us can just go around and introduce ourselves automatically. I wouldn't be calling out the name.
So, hello, I am McEwen, and I'm a junior at the research program at Morsels High School, New Jersey. And I was at the 2019 in-person virtual camp.
Hey, I'm Drake Hayes. I'm currently a freshman at Wabash College. Went to the camp in 2019. Great experience.
Hi, I'm Macy. I'm a high school senior at the Stanford Online High School, and like Anvesha said, I've attended the Wolfram Summer Camp for the past 3 years now.
Great. So why don't we get started with talking about the camp experience? So maybe all of you can go around and talk about your favorite thing at camp and briefly talk about your project. We'll start with Quinn.
Well, this was probably one of the best virtual camp experiences I've done, probably in part due to Wolfram already having so much of their own activities online as a company, and it just felt like a really smooth transition to virtual. I mean, I really loved the project time. That was definitely one of my favorite things because that was probably the most condensed learning I've ever done in such a short period of being able to get the knowledge necessary to prepare for a project and then produce the work on the project. But at the same time, all of the little presentations that everyone did on the things they had worked on in the Wolfram language, I really enjoyed. That just sort of expanded my view of all of the powerful things you can do with computation and all of the different sort of fields that were able to be connected through this. For my project, I was looking at a very specific hypergraph updating model within the Wolfram Physics Project, which is basically a hypergraph is just a graph that has multiple nodes can be connected by one hyper edge rather than just a binary relation where one edge connects two nodes. And it has the hypergraph has a set replace rule where every time one occurrence of a set appears, it's replaced with something else. And you can, through this, get similar processes to like cellular automata, of course, far more complicated. And these can be projected into space and visualized. And Jonathan Gorard had developed a bunch of tools for analyzing the differential geometry of these graphs. And I did that in particular, looking at this one graph and investigated some of the odd properties of it. And because it looked very much like something you would see in a real or manifold, but it had some very complex properties and was difficult to define by standard topology and differential geometry.
So the favorite part of the camp experience for me was I was kind of lucky to be able to attend in person before all things happened. And I really loved the interactions between the people and having an environment where everyone was dedicated to learning with Wolfram and continuing on a project. So there was that 2 week period where you were kind of separated from the world almost. Like you didn't have to worry about school or anything. It was just you're focused on learning and you were trying to do the project and meeting all the new different people and having that environment really helped, I think, to help each other accomplish more than we would have just probably done on our own time, I think.
That sounds great. Mukila, do you want to explain your project briefly?
Sure. I worked on visualizing Fourier synthesis. So this is the idea that you could take any frequency and the frequencies are made up of a sum of different waves. And so what I was working on with inputting any function and being able to approximate it using a Fourier transformation. So I was applying a Fourier analysis and then trying to show how the adding of different waves could reach different function approximations.
That sounds great. Let's have Drake go next.
To say the camp was honestly one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. Just getting to meet people from so many different backgrounds gave me a lot of perspective on the world, and made some really great friends. Still in contact with you and Waisha, and it's great. Yeah, and being in person, that was, I think, vital to the experience because, I was rooming with 3 other guys and really got to form a real connection with those people. And I feel like that's harder over Zoom. It also helped on working with the project. Like my mentor, Harshal, it was a huge help having him there with me and working together on it. We were doing simulations of binary star systems, which was so cool. And we showed how astronomers detect exoplanets using analyzing the brightness that solar systems give off. So we created graphs that model how when a planet passes over a star, the brightness dips. And so that's how astronomers detect those planets.
That's awesome. Let's hear from Macy next, and it would be great to hear both about her in-person and virtual experience. Maybe she can describe the most recent project that you completed at the Wolfram camp.
Yeah, sure. So I think when it comes down to both the virtual camp and the in-person camp, I think my biggest take the same. It was amazing to meet so many people from different backgrounds, like Drake said, as well as the collaboration both with other people in the camp, other fellow students, and also the mentors as well. And it was great to get so many perspectives. And also the lectures were absolutely fantastic, seeing how people working with Wolfram had actually applied it in their jobs, projects, and just seeing the full extent of the language, I think was and enlightening as going forward and using the Wolfram language, kind of seeing what I could continue to apply it to. And so this year for my project, like Quinn, I worked with visualizing a multi-way graph. So I took a hypergraph and mapped it so that it resembled our own universe's cosmic microwave background, which is basically the heat map of the universe. And hopefully by implementing a function that will recreate that for a specific hypergraph, we can get one step closer to finding a potential model of the universe.
That sounds really interesting. I think we can now dive into the more specifics of both the camps. So maybe we can start off by, say, describing a day in our life at both the virtual camp and the in-person camp. So let's start with Quinn.
Well, at the virtual camp, it wasn't nearly as bad for me as other people because at the time of the camp I was in Colorado, so it was started at 7 a.m., which was a bit rough because I was used to sleeping in. But once you got onto the sleep schedule, it depended on which one of the phases you woke up in, because like the first week where we were mostly learning the language, it was a little more relaxed because I would basically wake up, we would have our introductory meetings, and then we would go into a lesson about the language or a lecture on what someone had done. And I found that super fun. It was a great space to get used to collaborating with people a bit in the language, as we would go into Zoom breakout rooms occasionally in the classes to work on some of the assigned problems together. And all of the lectures were amazing, and it did help to have prepared a little bit from on the language beforehand in doing the application and doing all of the introductory course material that was sent out. And then after that, in the evening, there were more of the fun activities we did in the various meeting platforms. And that was a great place to get to know people. I know we played some Minecraft and Shell Shocked and just some fun games while on Zoom calls. And in the second phase of the week, it was a little more stressful, but I was learning so much, it was totally worth it. That was mostly, I would wake up and then we would head into the mentor spaces, and during that I would spend pretty much all of my free time that wasn't in like the planned activities researching and working on to try and better understand for my project to learn enough materials to put together something competent.
That really was very similar to our experience as well, although it was in person. But I would also like to have somebody who attended in person, their take on it. So Drake, maybe you could talk about your day in the life at camp. You're actually on mute, so.
Sorry about that. I remember complaining about how restrictive they were, like with where we could go and like what we could do when in our free time. And like now it's like I really wish I could just be back there, you know. Like I remember after having like a 3 or 4 hour lecture, going out for like half an hour in that like little courtyard with the balls and the frisbees, and they were just like, here, play with these. And then going over to one of the tables and playing cards with McKeelan and you and a couple other guys. And that was always great. Just, you know, sitting down and playing games. And then coming back in and listening to a couple more lectures and coming back and going to the dorms, playing more cards. And then when we started working on the project, just like that was very fun but very stressful, because at least initially I didn't really know where to take my project, and Harshal was a big help in that. And then the night before we were submitting, just like staying up late, just like cramming at the computer, you know, trying to write as fast as I could. So yeah, I think that really encapsulates the experience.
That is so true. But Drake, if I remember correctly, you were a very organized person and you got done with your post way before any of us did. So that's a different story altogether. So which kind of leads on to the next point that I wanted to talk about. I really wanted to touch upon the factor of networking and social life at camps. I would like to hear from somebody who attended in person and again, virtual. So maybe we can have Mukila talk about general social life at the camp. You could also talk about, say, specific activities we did or anything of that sort.
So I have to say camp, I think, was the most disciplined weeks of my entire summer that year. And the best time, I think, for socializing or like the general activity in camp was we would wake up kind of like at 6 and then go to breakfast at 8. And then breakfast, lunch, and dinner were one of the most fun parts because after like we would be able to talk about our projects and learn about each other because everybody came from a different background and there was so much we could learn because I remember there were a couple people who were really advanced in their mathematical studies and the first couple days I kind of just followed them around and I would be talking to them and I kind of absorbed so much information and I made good connections with them that like I think it was the most valuable time of a lot of the camp experience. And then after, like as Drake said, after we had some free time, we would go to like the community center, and we'd still be playing like I still have the Wolfram cards, and then we play like billiards. But I think we were able to manage our time socializing and working on our projects very well because we had like a choice between the two and we had a curfew, but I think that really helped with trying to help us to manage our time well.
That's very true. I think there's a degree of flexibility to how everybody manages their own time because outside of the lectures, it's pretty much up to us to manage the rest of the time on projects or socializing and maintaining a balance between the two. I know already Quinn mentioned a few of the activities that you guys did at this year's camp, but Macy, could you talk about or just elaborate on this point a bit more?
Yeah, so obviously being virtual, it's so hard to kind of, like Mukila was saying, establish those connections and stuff, right? Because we're seeing each other through Zoom screen. But, you know, we made it work. We had lots of game nights and we had just icebreaker sessions where we could get to know each other. We showed our pets or any cool collections that we had, our interests, both in academics and outside of academics. So over those 2 weeks, and obviously it's nice to have that period of time because you really do get to know the other people. And at the end, when everyone showcases their project, you'd be like, oh, I remember that kid from this lecture, you know, and so as you get to know people and then their projects become more recognizable. And if you find people with similar interests, you can begin talking to those guys and just kind of build up these connections. And there's still people that I'm in contact with from camp this year as well. So it's, you know, you can still forge those friendships even over Zoom.
That's really great to hear. So moving on to another really important segment of the camp is I would say that the project is very central to our camp experience, and I'm pretty sure all of us here would agree. And a big part of that is mentors. So I really wanted to talk about how our mentors helped us with our projects, especially from the viewpoint of a virtual camp or an in-person camp. So let's have Quinn first.
My mentor was Arben Calzici, and he had a super helpful perspective, especially because I'm very interested in math and physics, and he had a PhD in physics, and it was just really helpful for giving me strategies on how to actually learn these things, because some of this was like very new research and work that I had to learn how to work with, and I got lots of just great tips from him, as well as all of my issues and mistakes that I made in the language with the code. Like for the Zoom mentor experience, I probably should say how that worked. We basically had, I think at some point it was like over 6 hours a day of project time, where we would just sit in the Zoom room with the mentor and our like cohort of like 4 or 5 people, 4 to 6 people, I think, for every mentor. And we would just be sitting there working on the project. And if you had a question or thought you could help or help someone else out with something or just wanted to see what someone else was doing, you could just ask in the group, and Arbin was there, and you could get feedback and help and tips on writing your computational essay, writing your code, the content of what you were studying. And yeah, it was just a super supportive environment. And especially if you had any like questions beyond your mentor, they could reach out to other people within Wolfram, and there's connections to people who know basically everything at the company.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think you made a really good point there with talking about how if like you have a very niche project, they can definitely put you in touch with somebody who knows what you're dealing with and can really help you out. Let's have Drake next.
So my mentor was Harshal, and he was a huge help, like I said, in my project. He was really good about being like, Drake, you need to get focused on this. And so really helped me keep moving along in the project and finish on time. And he also gave me a lot of suggestions where I could take it further. One thing he said after camp that I could do was like looking at what it would look like for a person standing on an exoplanet with 2 stars. And so something I've done some work with since the camp. And it was really great because he wasn't just a mentor, but he also became a really great friend. I run cross country and track, and like every morning I would run before everything started. And on the last day, he asked me if he could join me, and I was like, sure. And he came down wearing sandals and khaki shorts and polo to run with me. And we ran about a mile, and he was, it's like, I gotta stop. And he got an Uber back. So then that was a great time with Arshal.
That's really cool to hear.
So
Yeah, I
funny.
think we definitely keep in touch with our mentors. Rory was my mentor, and I'm obviously in touch with them. Let's have Mukilan next. And Mukilan, if you don't mind, could you just talk about how we were assigned to our mentors and how did we spend time with mentors, how we arranged into cohorts, etc. So could you probably touch more upon the technicalities?
So I believe first we picked our projects, and then we were assigned mentors based on our topics. So mine was the Fourier transform, and I was like a freshman coming off of high school, and I had no introduction to calculus or anything that I was going to be working on in my project. And I was matched up with Jeremy Stratton Smith. I think that was my second mentor after we had like a couple reshuffle. And Jeremy was really acquainted with a lot of math, and we were the math group. So each mentor was divided into their speciality. So I was in the math group, and we were working on our projects. I remember one of my teammates was working on enumerating polycubes or creating nets for complex polyhedra. And Jeremy never really gave us the answer. He would always lead us on to the right path, but never give us the right answer. And that was so satisfying when we finally found out a solution that would work. And I think a lot of the other mentors too, one of them was working on machine learning with their group, training neural networks, or the other was working on, I think, different analysis of data. So data analysis, and that was really cool.
Great. Macy.
Did you want me to elaborate on the technicality part, or? Yeah, so I think Mukilan basically said it all. We get, based on our interests, we get separated into different groups. So I, along with another boy named Pedro, were working on physics projects and such. So I think it was just us in that group. But it was really nice because we had time to both get to know each other as well as each other's projects. And obviously our mentor helped us out with those all the time. And it's just been a great experience. I think having that connection so readily available should you have any questions or working with each other, especially since we were in such a small group, we were always there to help each other. And I think just, again, as I said before, that collaboration is key, especially in a place and an experience.
That would be good. Great. Yeah, with that, I would move on to a slightly different question. So obviously, all of us had great experiences at the camp. But if there could be one thing you could change about the experience, what would it be? So let's start with Quinn.
Well, I would have loved to have done the camp in person, because no matter how good it can be done in line, it never can quite match up to in person. So I guess that would be the one thing for me, but that feels a little bit like cheating on my answer. I'm I haven't done too many like rigorous academic summer camps, so I don't have too much of a frame of reference to compare with Wolfram, but I'm just thinking of, and I'm remembering all of the things that I'm thinking about we did at the camp.
That's all right. We can actually come back to you. Oh, wait.
My one,
yeah, you go ahead.
My one thing is, if there had been, like, we used this service called Pathable, I think, where we could like walk around near each other to communicate. And I wish there had been something, or at least Pathable had been a little bit smoother or integrated into something else, so we could have had just some more of a simulated social environment to talk about things, because it was just a very awkward system to use. I know Macy can probably attest to this as well, but yeah, just some better simulated social environment. Oh yeah, high fidelity. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Great. Let's have Macy next.
So I think, like Quinn said, it's so hard, especially when you come to a virtual camp. You'd want to say, oh, I'd wish it was in person. And, I do. Having the experience of the in-person camp was amazing. So yes, I do wish that it was in person. But I'm not sure I'd really change anything. All of the years I've had such great experiences. I wouldn't trade those. So I think, although I will say, like Quinn said, Pathable was the calendar system of organization, and sometimes things wouldn't be updated all the way. But isn't every calendar like that? So, I don't think I can really have any say on this. Everything worked so smoothly.
That's great to hear. Drake.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we complained a lot about how restrictive it was with where we could go. And so one thing I would change is like just being able to kind of freely explore the campus at least, and maybe even the surrounding city. I would have liked to have gone to Boston to watch the fireworks. That was something I was a little disappointed about, but the fireworks show that we did see was really cool.
That's valid. Let's have Makila next.
I think going off of the restrictiveness, we did end up changing it by the second week, and that really helped. So I think that was that one change was integrated into our camp experience. That was cool. But I think that one thing I would really change is the camp length. Really, I think 2 weeks is kind of too short, but it's a great time frame to work with everyone, get to know each other, and do a project. But the first entire week was kind of lectures, and we had 1 week to work on it. But I think maybe like a 3-week camp would really help us with getting to know each other a lot more and being able to accomplish a more complex project. and having like I personally had to cut down my project like 3 steps because of that time frame, and I think I would have really hoped to have achieved like another step or two.
Yeah, I've heard people say that before. And that sort of leads me on to the next question. So, Mughilan, I know you extended your project outside of the camp. So maybe all of us could go around and talk about our post-camp experiences, which, by the way, we did an episode for. So that's a future directions episode available. But Mughilan, maybe you could talk about your post-camp experiences.
Could you repeat the last part? My computer kind of went out.
Oh, it's okay. So could you like talk about your post-camp experiences? So maybe any programs you were a part of, how you extended your project and stuff like that.
So when we first came into quarantine, I actually picked up my old project again and I started working on it, and I realized there was so much that I missed. And with the further, I had like a section of further developments, and I realized a lot of the things that I did wouldn't work. So I built a separate program that worked on the first half, so separating a given function into its composite parts. Uh, my camp, during camp, I worked on putting it together. Now I was working on splitting it out. I'm currently unable to access it because my Wolfram program ran out. I'll have to redo that this Christmas. But it was really cool because Wolfram is such a versatile language that we could accomplish so much compared to maybe Java or Python. Because as people were saying, there's visualizations that are kind of built into Wolfram, working from physics projects to higher dimensional geometry to just working with pure math. And going off of that, I remember last year I was part of the WELP project, Wolfram Emerging Leaders Project, and I know that Anwisha, you were part of it. And that was really cool because it was a separate experience from camp itself, where camp was based on just individual projects. This was a group project, and it was working with a team, and we were able to accomplish some like predictive gerrymandering projects. So gerrymandering graphs based on graph theory.
That's awesome. Just for the reference, well, for the Wolfram Emerging Leaders Program is a semester-long program that takes place in the fall following the camp, and a group of students from the camp are invited back to work on long-term projects in groups of 3 or 4 people on a topic or specialization of their choice. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now that we're on the topic of WELP, maybe we could have Drake speak because I know he did the WELP program too.
Yeah, being part of WELP was great. That's something I did after the camp, and I was working with Brian and my roommate. I'm blanking on his name. I'm sorry. It'll come to me. But we did like simulations of how diseases spread through populations, which very apt for the world we're living in now. Didn't really expect a pandemic to hit after we made that project, but yeah, we did something with that, and we used an SIR model for susceptible, infected, and then recovered, and that used some differential equations, and so we had these graphs that kind of showed how a disease would spread through that population, which is really cool.
You mentioned that you're currently working for and with the Wolfram Physics project, so maybe you could talk about that a bit, or any other programs you may have been a part of.
Yeah, after the camp, I continued working on my project with the Wolfram Physics project, where it's less collaborative. It's much more individual, but I have a mentor and lots of people who are also doing physics projects. There's a lot, way more impressive people than me there. Like there's lots of grad students and PhDs in physics, and I'm with just the junior research affiliate. But my project was looking at that one particular hypergraph and trying to get some geometric or topological classification of it. And I have extended my project into getting some rough categorizations of the growth types and features of different types of these hypergraphs that will evolve from the set replace functions. And I've broken them down into 3 categories and can do analysis on all, or have specific analyses for all 3 of them to handle them differently to get more results. And now I'm moving into a new or sort of further project that I have to, I've been doing a large amount of reading. I have like about 1,000 pages of math texts to read just to get my knowledge up to pace, but I'm trying to derive something analogous to the Chern-Gauss-Bonnet theorem for the fractional dimensional hypergraphs, using the fundamental group and the Riemann curvature tensor projection that you can get through the optimal transport definition of the curvature given in Jan Olivier's 2011 paper. All of this is on like the Wolfram Physics Project website if anyone's interested.
That sounds really complex, but it also sounds really interesting. Let's have Macy next. I know you worked with mentors to extend your project, at least for our year of the camp. So maybe you could talk about that a bit.
Yeah, so my project in 2019 was on visualizing a binary black hole merger. So after the camp had ended, like McClellan said, the nice thing would be to have like an extra week to finish up some stuff. So my last part of the project was actually recreating the sound or the ping that was detected by LIGO. So that was how the collision of the 2 black holes was actually detected. So I worked with my mentor, Jonathan Gerard, to derive that ping, which was a really cool result and kind of wrapped everything up nicely. And then for this year's project, I'm also continuing it by making a function. So as I mentioned, I was mapping a hypergraph to kind of fit the cosmic microwave background. And so for that, I actually made a function, and I'm hoping to put that in the function repository this upcoming break.
That sounds great. I have a couple questions, and these are sort of specifically directed towards Macy because of her continued involvement with the Wolfram High School Summer Camp. So perhaps you could talk a bit about how the camp has evolved over the years. So you've been there for 3 years, and how has it changed?
I wouldn't say it's actually changed that much. I think it's remained pretty status quo, which has been nice. There haven't been too many differences. Obviously, this year it was online, so certain things needed to be adjusted. But I think the nice thing about returning each year has been that it has remained the same, and that, you know, we kind of, it's, you know, the same experience. So each year I feel more and more comfortable, like, okay, this is how this is going to go down, and this is how this program is going to run. So yeah, I don't think it's changed that much over the years.
Maybe you could formally break down any differences, both the pros and the cons of a in-person camp and then a virtual camp.
You cut out a little bit at the beginning, but I think I got what you were saying, but you can stop me whenever if you want me to mention something else. Obviously, the cons of a virtual camp, you're virtual, and I think that's the biggest thing. So I don't really think there's anything else, but I would say the massive pro of that is that we still get to have the camp, and we still get to have these experiences and make friends and complete our projects. You know, obviously you aren't face to face with your mentor, which was, I think, one of the biggest pros of the in-person camp. To kind of have that direct experience and kind of hail your mentor over whenever you want, be like, hey, I have a question, can you help me out? That's more of just raising your hand in Zoom these days. But yeah, so I would say probably just being virtual. The biggest con of in-person camp? Not much. I mean, you're there, you're working on your project, you're meeting people, you're meeting mentors, you're meeting Wolfram staff. It's just a great place to establish connections.
That's well put. And finally, you have attended the camp 3 times, as we've mentioned many times in this episode. So what is it about the Wolfram camp that makes you keep coming back?
So I'm interested in astrophysics, and I think, for like the past 4 years now, I've been kind of dedicated in saying this is what I want to pursue. And so coming to the Wolfram summer camp for the first time in 2018 was my first chance to really like be in the field and experience it and understand, like, is this what I really want to do? And it just affirmed that for me. Being in there and working on my project and working with equations that I'd never even seen before and understanding math that was years above me was just such an amazing and mind-blowing experience. And it was so exciting too, because you see other people's projects, you see your own, and it's just this massive sea of intellectuals coming together, which is inspiring, it's motivating. And so each year, I repeat that experience, even with it being online. And so I think having that, and of course, being able to work on a project and really put my knowledge to the test in completing something that, maybe can't be completed in necessarily 2 weeks' time, it's always a challenge, and I'm always up for it.
That's great to hear. And finally, to wrap up today's episode, I would like to just talk about how the camp has been instrumental to helping us develop our interests, or in terms of availing various opportunities. So maybe we can start with McKeown.
So developing interest towards our project, or like, could you rephrase the question?
I think it's sort of like at a personal level. For some person, they might have just discovered they're interested in this field, or it might have just been a general growth. So basically, how has the camp been instrumental? It's yours too.
Okay, so
Mold.
I think the camp was pretty life-changing for me. Number one, like on a social level, it's made me more confident to like work with people, because it was one of the first times I was away from home for 2 weeks and working with people like so much smarter than me. I think I was one of the younger attendees, and it was kind of intimidating the first week. There was a bit like a time period where I was kind of questioning myself. I was like, maybe I might not be able to do something as impressive as so many people have done. But that 2 weeks has proved to me that when I set my mind on something, I'm able to provide a result that I'm really proud of and that I want to continue working towards. And as I mentioned, it was the first time I was like looking at calculus, and I think that really helped me to set on this motion of doing further mathematical research, or like just research as in looking at what is out there. And I've discovered a lot of ideas about different integration techniques, or like things that are not taught in school. And I've been able to venture beyond that. And that really has helped fine tune like what I want to do in the future.
That's wonderful to hear. Quinn.
Well, I applied to the program because one of my friends who is 2 years ahead of me at school had recommended it, and just said how much he had learned about computation, and it had expanded his view of math. And like, he was also very passionate about mathematics. And my main interest was physics and mathematics when I went to the camp. And I guess, well, in terms of mathematics, it got me really interested in algebraic topology and differential topology as fields to study more of. But just looking at all of the computational things, and even like, my project wasn't really as related to like the new kind of science computational things as directly. just learning about that and seeing all of these connections to like some of the ideas in new kinds of science and like the Wolfram physics project that some people were doing, that just, I got really interested in that and like how computation is tying together all of these projects that are, because I remember someone in our cohort was doing a project on Latin, and you're using this one language that can do work with languages, and at the same time you can do work with theoretical physics, and just how that's all tied together. And I think there's just so much connection, like in like how, that you can't really see without all these computational thinking, and also just connection to other people on giving everyone a common ground, even if they're doing very different things.
Mm-hmm. That's nice to hear. Drake.
I think it was great for forming connections. Like, it definitely opened up a lot of opportunities for me that I wouldn't otherwise have. Just like, in whatever career I go into, I'll be able to kind of reference the experience I had here and show them some of the stuff that I've done with Wolfram. But on a more personal level, I would say it was definitely a very humbling experience. Just getting to meet people just that were just geniuses. Like, I guess in my experiences beforehand, I was like, oh man, I'm like such a genius. And then I got there, I was like, these people are so smart. Like, I remember being in a room with a couple other guys, and they were talking about this book about the mathematics of bubbles, which, you know, you wouldn't think would be that complicated, but I was sitting there and being like, I have no idea what's going on. And so it definitely inspired me to kind of do more with what I'm doing. Really focus on my studies and do more intensive projects and really go the extra mile.
That's really well put, especially the part about it's a humbling experience. That's very, very true. There are definitely going to be times when you feel like I'm being left out, but that's all right. We definitely learn a lot from the camp experience. Macy.
Yeah, so I think, meeting everybody and, I think it's just a sense of diversity in the end. Everybody has such diverse interests, diverse projects, diverse backgrounds. And so making those connections, meeting those people, learning about them, and also learning about yourself in the process, because it does give you that experience, as I mentioned before, to really hone in on what you want to do, going forward. And that might be apt to change. You might get to camp and do a project you never thought you'd end up doing and find yourself loving that one topic. It's just such a great experience learning, about, as I said, about yourself and about your project or whatever materials are at hand. So, and I think that's the great thing. It's just, 2 weeks of, passion and growth.
Awesome. So with that, we are actually at the end of today's episode. I would once again like to thank our panelists today, Quinn, Macy, Drake, and McEwen. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your camp experience. I would also like to thank our audience for joining us in keeping up with this series.